Would you please pray with me? Let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. A number of our best Bible scholars in the country, or in the world, like to argue that Luke was written about the 70s, maybe late 60s, probably early 70s, maybe as late as the 80s of the first century. We've been reading Luke all the way through from the very beginning over this calendar year, since the beginning of December, which is why we had that long chunk of Luke that sort of seemed out of normal. And that chunk is a tough one to swallow for us, I think, nowadays. I mean, there's a lot of harsh language in there, right? Families will be split, look for the weather, there's all kinds of crazy imagery. But if you know a little bit historically, a little history lesson here about the first century, and if this book was written in the 70s of the first century, some cataclysmic stuff has happened for the people who are writing and hearing these stories. At this point in the 70s, those who followed Jesus, and Jews for that matter, would have had their whole way of life destroyed. That is to say that they were centered around their individual town synagogues, sort of like churches for us, but then with the central worshiping space, the temple in Jerusalem. In the late 60s, the temple was completely destroyed by the Romans. And all people who followed Jesus, and even many Jews, were outlawed across the whole area by the Romans. And so Romans were sending soldiers throughout all the Roman Empire to kill especially the Christians, the people that followed Jesus. And many of the Jews would help root out Christians here and there. It was the Christians, though, that were most angering to the Romans. And there's some history about why that happened. So you can imagine when you read language, like we just heard in the gospel there, language about families being split apart. From now on, 5 in one house will be divided, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3, father against son, son against father. That happened in the first century. By the time the people who are telling these stories and hearing these stories are hearing them, these things aren't just some prophetic future thing that may happen in the future. They are their very reality. There are people that stayed with the Jesus movement and against the Jesus movement. There are people that allied with Rome and allied against Rome. All this dark language about how the world is going to hell is their reality. It is their truth. And so Jesus, in the middle of this, intersects this section about worrying. We can probably relate to this, right? I mean, when the kids were all up here a moment ago, we all raised our hands, except for Jeff, and I think Jeff just needs to be more honest with himself. Maybe not, though. Maybe we should all hope to be like Jeff. About the anxiety, the worry that we all share. There is a lot of things to be worried about in the world today, right? In many ways, we can look at this list of things here, and many church people have said this is speaking about our current day. It isn't. This is speaking about a day 1900 years ago, but yet it feels like it's very true for us now. It feels like we still live in this place where everything with the world is wrong. And we actually live in a pretty cushy place here in the world compared to how many other brothers and sisters live in much more dangerous, war-torn, ravished areas. We live in a good spot, and yet we feel this great worry for the world, worry for ourselves, worry for our families. And so Jesus gives us these words that seem amazing. I tell you, don't worry about your life, what you're going to eat, about your body, what you'll wear, for life is more than food, body more than clothing. Consider the ravens, birds of the air, in another translation. They don't sow, they don't reap, and they don't have storehouses or barns, and yet God feeds them. Aren't you of more value? We all say, yeah. Consider the birds. Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And so we hear these things. We hear the words about the lilies of the field. And don't we know that to be true? I mean, we know that we are of more value. We know that the birds don't plant stuff, and yet there's an abundance of food for them. We know that largely we don't cultivate trees and shrubs and grass and all the other stuff that grows in our world, and yet it grows with great abundance. But that doesn't make our worry go away, does it? I mean, so I think there are many times in my life where I've read these words and thought, oh, yeah, exactly. This puts things in perspective. And I am able to chase my worry away. But then there are other times where I read these words and that just simply does not take care of my worry. Is there anyone else that is like this? That your worry just is something you cannot grab hold of and logic away, to think it away, to find the right anecdotal thing to just make it go away. Well, if that is you, I think you are in the company of people over thousands of years. I think you're in the company of people who told these stories and heard them as their life was literally at risk of being hunted down by Romans. We are not being hunted down by anybody, I don't think, most of us. There are those in the world that are. But I'm still stuck with this idea of what we do about our worry. And the truth is, I wish I had magic words to tell you, that I wish that I could just read these in a way, these words of Jesus, in a way that would then be like, oh, my chest is loose now. I don't feel that tightness any longer. I have no worry at all in the world any longer. But I don't think that's our reality. At least it's been from my experience from time to time. That is not my reality. So here is a practice I would like to do with you all right now that I have found helpful. And it's an ancient practice, almost as ancient as these words. It's the practice of centering prayer. So one Tuesday a month, on the last Tuesday of the month, we do a contemplation class, a meditation class. This is actually what we do if you want to know what we do. So most of you don't come, so now I'm just doing it to you on Sunday morning. But the practice of centering prayer is basically, at its core, the idea of letting go of your worry, letting go of life, letting go of your anxiety. And so we're going to move here real plainly. I'll narrate through it for a little bit, but in just a moment, I'm going to invite you all to relax yourselves, focus on your breathing, and then pick a certain image or a certain thing that gives you peace, like maybe the image of the cross or a symbol around our worship space that gives you peace. For young children, I often tell them, like, think of someone that you just love without any breakdown, just something, and continue to hold that image in your mind and breathe through it. And then every time your brain thinks of something else, let it go. Like, name that thing you are thinking of. Like, I am anxious about what I'm doing later today, or about a medical thing I have coming up. And then name it, and then visualize a way for it to go away from you. Maybe put it on a leaf and watch the leaf blow away in your mind. Or maybe put it on a leaf in a river, this is my favorite one, and see it float away from you. And then go back to your image of the person you love or the thing you want to focus on. And guess what's going to happen? Your brain will think about something else that will distract you, and then you'll let that go, and then you'll come back to your thing. And so the time of centering prayer becomes this repetition of letting go. And the goal is not to find some perfect place of tranquility, because our brains don't work like that, but rather to train ourselves to let go of the things when they do occur. I heard one person do centering prayer with a large group of people for like 25 minutes. We're not going to do it for 25 minutes. And at the end of the centering prayer time, this person came up to the presenter and said, "That was the worst time ever. I had like 10,000 thoughts go through my head, and I was distracted the whole time." And the presenter said, "I think you might have had the greatest blessing of anyone in the group, because you had 10,000 chances to let go," which is really the point of centering prayer. And so I offer this up because this has been really helpful in my own life, this idea of letting go in contemplation, in silence. And we're not going to use complete silence right now. I'm going to have Ben play it a little bit. And so I'm going to narrate through the opening of it to get our sort of bodies in a good position to do this. And then I'm just going to give you space to do it. And Ben's going to play lightly in the background. And then when he deems the time is enough, he'll finish, and then he'll play the hymn that we'll sing as the hymn of the day. But right now I encourage all of you to find a way to sit in your chair that is comfortable for a little bit of time, and to close your eyes. As you close your eyes, the first thing that is good to do is just to release all the tension in your body. To do a body scan, maybe I like to start from the top of my head and consider all the places where I'm holding tension, where there's tight muscles, paying particular note to the corners of my eyes, maybe my cheeks, clenched jaws. Slowly working my way down, my shoulders are often a place of tension, letting them fall heavily down along my sides, letting my hands just sort of cascade across my lap with my palms open, ready to receive. Work your way down through your body, letting go of tension. Relax the muscles in your legs, your knees. Maybe wiggle your fingers and toes just to get out the very last remainders of tension. And take a deep breath in, and releasing that breath. And Maybe one more together. In and out. And as you resume your normal breathing, consider each breath in receiving the freshness of God's Holy Spirit that comes into you, and with each breath out, the release of that tension, that anxiety, that worry. And so now I invite you into this time of holding on to that image, that person, that thing that you can center yourself on. And as your mind gets distracted with all the other things of life, with the worries that you bring to this moment, release them. Put them on that leaf and watch them blow away. Let it flow down the stream away from you and come back to your centering image. Give yourself grace as your mind is flooded with other thoughts and pull you back into anxious moments. This, friends, is just what our brains do. Be graceful as you let go. I invite you into this moment of letting go now together.